From here into Aquatic Park, which is the San Francisco area where the swim finishes, the first swim it took me 45 minutes. The second swim took me 95 minutes. I got caught in a tide change that they didn't tell me about. I think they were trying to get even with me or something like that. But it pushed me considerably off course. And of course, that's what all of these guys would have to deal with. They didn't have a library here with tide charts in it, okay? Well, the people in the past have told me, and maybe you're thinking, wow, look at all these windows. They could just look out the window and see what was going on. Not really, because have you guys been in yet? You're just in your first stop, okay. When you get inside, just think about what that comment was that I just made. You'll see that you don't have access to windows because the cages, as we call them, are kind of back from the main wall area. So you really don't have access to it. And even if you did, as you guys go up, and it still may be time, as you're going up, walking up this hill here, the water will be ebbing on the far side of the island. And you'll see whirlpools out there as it's passing this island going out the Golden Gate. And of course, keep in mind the Golden Gate Bridge is a mile across. And I'm familiar with it because I did the swim north as well as south, okay? But the truth of the matter is, that's not very wide for 500 square miles of water. So the current activity is just tremendous, tremendous. Okay, with that by way of background, and let me suggest that as you have any questions as we go over this thing, boy, I hope they don't come and get us. It's all part of Alcatraz.
Just hoping we don't get pooped on.
If you have any questions as we go through this, throw the hand up and we'll try and answer them right at that time. Anyhow, by way of prior swimming, just real fast, this is a shot of yours truly a couple years back with his police and fire games medals that he won over the years. Now, I only show you that to give you some sense in terms of what I'll be talking about in terms of swimming in the bay. I'll be clear to admit to you right off the bat, however, pool swimming is nothing like bay swimming. Please understand that. The first time I went in and did a swim where I just wanted to swim out and see Alcatraz, and I didn't do it with anybody with me. I shouldn't admit this, but I'm a truthful person. I got about halfway to where I wanted to get, and I all of a sudden had this overwhelming feeling that I didn't want to swim anymore, okay? Well, I forced myself back in, went up into the sauna. One of the old timers came in and I introduced myself and told him what I just told you. And he said, look, sonny boy, he said, you may be the best pool swimmer in the world, but in this cold water, it's a whole different ballgame. And he was absolutely correct. Okay, this is by way of background and moving into what we're talking about with regard to escapes. Usually they let me dress up like this when I give this presentation, but they told me you were a casual group, so I didn't do it. Now, something that we've got to keep in mind as we're talking about this issue is, and in the past there were wardens that would say to the prisoners who were allegedly rumored to be planning to escape, go ahead and do it because a shark is out there that will have you for lunch. So I don't care. If you want to go, go. So we look into this issue of sharks, right? Now, you may be not able to see this all quite that well, but this chart, get this damn thing on. This chart is a chart that shows great white killings along the California coast. Not just here, up and down the coast, okay? And we're looking at roughly 10 people killed between 52 and 03, the last recorded killing. But again, I emphasize, everything is outside the gate. It's almost like there's a sign under the water that says, great whites stay out, because there hasn't been any attacks here. Now we know there's sand sharks here, but they don't bother with humans. I don't know what they ate. They don't bother with humans. So, I mention that only because, yes, this place was allegedly escape-proof, because if you did get into the water and you tried to swim and could survive the cold water, then a shark would have you. Not true. We have no indications whatsoever. And I'm not just talking about prisoners. I'm just talking about anybody, you know, into the bay. Okay, now the history of escape attempts. In terms of your background and your knowledge with regard to escape attempts from here, did anybody ever escape from here? Do you know?
No.
It's like, yeah,
Huh?
yeah.
5 feet.
Okay.
No.
Unaccounted.
Unaccounted.
Yeah.
Maybe not successfully.
Plenty's
But they left this island. They left this island.
Okay, all of you are right on target. It's amazing how you're zeroing in on things. And I'll just go through this kind of quickly. We have 14 escape attempts involving 36 inmates. We have 7 of them that were killed by gunshots. What does that mean? The guy up in the tower nailed them as they were trying to go over the fence. Now, of course, keep in mind, why would somebody attempt to get out of here to the extent that they risk getting shot? Where do you go topside, fellas and ladies, and see this place, which, you know, it's kind of neutral now because it's empty. But if you were in this place day in and day out, okay, where I have heard it said that prisoners love to work in the gardens. Why? Because they like the odor of the fragrance of the plants. What was that contrasted against? Shut up! What was that contrasted against?
Testosterone.
Well, true, but
2 showers.
the body, well, 1 shower a week, and the body odor of the inmates was horrendous, they say, okay? So think about that as you walk through this place. 1 drowned, 21 returned, 2 returned and executed, 5, here we go with what we heard already, 5 are still missing. So I guess that's where you're telling me that those guys made it, right? In any event, who does that include? In 1937, Rowe and Cole. These were 2 bank robbers that were serving time in Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAllister, Oklahoma. I know that area well because I served there as a guard officer with the Marine Corps in McAllister, not at the prison. Those 2, along with the ones that I think you were mentioning, and that is Lee Morris and the Anglin brothers. Lee Morris was what? What was he in here for? Anybody know? Bank burglary. He was in Louisiana. He was one of the old bank burglary guys. And they drilled through a wall in some bank, and they came out of there with $6,500 in coins. And he lugged those damn things all the way over to the next town to hide them, right? I mean, this guy was a hard worker, right? And he knew how to drill through things. So what happens when he gets caught? And the Anglin brothers, they're Florida guys, bank robbers. Where do they end up? They all end up initially at Leavenworth, and then they're out here at Alcatraz, okay? And that's when they first get together. One last one before I flip through this chart, and that is we had 1 prisoner who made it to shore. Made it to shore. Didn't say he got away, but he made it to shore. And we'll cover him in a second because he's kind of interesting with what he did to get out of here. All right, swimming in the bay. Now here I am swimming in the bay, but I'm being somewhat, taken care of, if you will, because there's a boat right next to me just in case I have trouble. All I can do is raise my hand and they'll take me out. But every time I made a swim, I would tell everybody and his uncle I was doing it, and I would not give up because I didn't want to be embarrassed. It's the old story of once a Marine, always a Marine. I didn't want to have somebody tell me I was a sissy. Okay, as you go around today, and I think it's mainly in the bookstore, if you have an interest in this escape stuff, there's a pamphlet, like the pamphlets that were over there in the kiosk, that addresses just the issue of escapes. And if you want to appear to be, and you probably will be, an expert when you get back home, get one of these things for $1. You can lay it out on your coffee table and tell people over a few pops, right? I'm going to now tell you what it's like to escape from Alcatraz. And it has everything, believe me, laid out in quite a bit of detail with regard to the escape attempts, as you can see listed here. Okay, let's fast forward to the escape. Now we're talking about Lee Morris and the Anglin brothers. Lee Morris, as a youngster, lived in Maryland. Anybody here from Maryland? And while living in Maryland, he burglarized a number of houses in the area where he lived. He ended up being committed to the school for boys in that area, and that's where he served about 6 years of his young years. Coincidentally, when I got transferred from Florida, I was in the FBI in Jacksonville. They sent me to Washington. One of the areas that I got assigned was this area I just told you about, which was kind of coincidental because I had an interest in this escape stuff way back then. And here I am assigned to the place where this guy started his criminal career. Okay, in terms of them then arriving here at Alcatraz, the three of them get together, and you're going to see it topside when you go up there. The Anglin brothers are in cells right next to each other. What's going on there? What, they put them right next to each other? Because they knew they were escape risks the whole time. Federal policy was you must put known relatives adjacent to each other. So that's the reason they were together. Well, of course, they used that to their advantage because they were together. Frank Lee Morris was right down a couple cells from him, and they worked it from there. They drilled a hole through the wall. And when they did the hole in the wall, there was a grate in front of it that they, down in the paint shop, replicated so that every night when they went through the hole and up to near the roof of the building to work on their stuff, they would put this piece that they had replicated there, and they were never caught. Never caught. There were a couple guards who got severely punished, which is not part of stuff that you read here. But I went out to the National Archives in San Bruno and read some of the old records. And a couple of these guards got severely punished because of what occurred. That's understandable. That happened. Okay. So you know about the thing in the back. You know about the head they made with plaster. Plaster that they got in the prison. Where'd they get the hair from? Anybody know where they got the hair from? Barbershop. Barbershop. Okay. Very good. Made sense, right? Why not? May as well put it to use. Don't leave it there on the floor. Let's pick it up and put it to use. They did all of this stuff, and then the famous night came very fast. Because Morris was having trouble getting through the ceiling where there was a big vent going to the roof. And their plan was to go through this vent and get on the roof. Well, finally one day, I guess one evening, he was working on it and he got through. So he goes through, calls these guys, they get all their stuff together. There was one other fellow that's not mentioned in the escape stuff, a guy named West from New York, who we understand later told us he didn't know how to swim. He didn't know how to swim, and even though he BS'd everybody, in the final analysis it was assumed that he said, to heck with this, I didn't know how to swim, so I'm going to make believe I can't get out of my cell and go up there, okay? And he was involved in this thing all along. And he kept telling stories about, oh, they were going to do this and do that. I don't think he knew what they were talking about. I mean, this was just an old gut feeling on my part, but that's where that was. So, they got out. Can't see it from here, but we will. As soon as we finish up here, we'll take a walk up the hill. And that will take you on your way to where you're going. Have you seen the movie yet?
No, not yet.
No, okay, all right. Well, maybe you ought to do the movie first. Before we go. Anyhow, here we are. Frank Lee Morris is this guy right here in the postcard. 5'7", 135 pounds, in tremendous condition, okay? And was very smart. What was his IQ? Anybody know? 135. Not too bad, right? He could be a sergeant in my platoon, right? Okay, so they got out. Now, what did the headlines the next day say in the local newspaper? The big Alcatraz mystery. Did 3 swim or drown? Well, I mean, I can give you a theory about that, but without the bodies, what can you say? In fact, when we finish up here, or if not now, maybe later on, you can take a peek over those railings and look down underneath the pilings. The day after they escaped, the FBI was out here right away, as you might imagine, with bloodhounds. And they traced them all the way to the waterline. But in addition to that, FBI guys in the morning and at night went up in helicopters, and they were looking underneath the dock areas on the presumption that the bodies may have gotten wedged into the dock areas, which if you look under there, you'll see it's very simple. Never any indication. The only indication that we really had was they go out over the side by the power building and the water is moving out, ebb tide, at that time. In all probability, this boat that they're in, or this raft, which didn't have a rudder, had to go whatever way the water went. So if that's true, and they went out, and maybe into the water, we did find a packet of pictures of the Anglin brothers family at the base of the Golden Gate Bridge. That's the only thing that we can kind of put together to suggest that, boom, they went out. Okay? All right, any questions on the big Alcatraz mystery? Did they swim or drown? In fact, they had a swimmer at that time make the swim from here in. But she was a long distance swimmer. She was in the water. And, well, I don't want to bias you guys. Okay, this is the one prior to that. This is Ted Rowe and Ralph Rowe. And they went out of a building. The far end of the island, there was a building called the Mat Shop. And in the mat shop, they did just that. They put mats together, rubber mats for Navy ships. But these guys had already cut through the bars, and every time they would leave there, they would put black shoe polish in the area where they had cut through. And it was easy for them to pull the bars out. So one day, when you couldn't see any further than from here to that ironwork stuff because of the fog, they went back to their mat shop area. They saw that fog. They didn't even hesitate. They went right through the window, out over into the water. They were never seen again. But they went into the water again in that similar location, right, that I'm telling you about. These guys went. Okay, the last escape in that location is Scott. John Paul Scott, serving time for bank robbery. It's this guy here with the handcuffs on. And John Paul Scott tells us later on that when he was in the laundry where he worked, he would soak his body in a 55-gallon drum of cold water to try and acclimate himself to the cold water. Now, here's the first guy that we know of that took into account that issue. In addition to that, because he wasn't confident with just that, he stole a whole bunch of surgical gloves and blew them up when he was there at the base and put them under his uniform, and that, along with his cold water, carried to where? Anybody know? Fort Point, the fort on the southern end of the Golden Gate Bridge, which is 3.5 miles from here. It's amazing that he got that far. But the poor guy, you know, he lands on the rocks and he's half dead. I mean, he just is really out of it. Army guard comes down and gets him, right? And the Army guard calls up out here and says, hey, we got one of your guys, because he still had the prison uniform on. And out here they say, hey, we knew he escaped, we assumed he drowned. You know, which was kind of a valid thing. He's the only one. What's his name? John Paul Scott. This is a good question to ask somebody if you're sitting at the bar somewhere having a drink. Can you tell me the name of the guy that made it from Alcatraz? Didn't escape, but he made it to San Francisco. Who was this guy? Okay. Anybody got any questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
How did they determine which prisoners were transferred into Alcatraz? I hear bank robbers, murderers, tax evasion. What determined, this is maximum security, right? What is it that brought you to Alcatraz compared to other prisoners?
The primary consideration, my understanding is escape risks. They didn't want anybody escaping as they had them escaping in local facilities. So the crime, while it was important, the major consideration was, were you escape risk? Well, of course you are. You're a Red Sox fan, you want to get back and play with the Red Sox, right? But that's basically what I understood, to tell you the truth. Okay? All right, this kind of just lays out the swims that I told you that I did so that I speak with some degree of validity in the bay. And let me tell you, anytime you're wanting to challenge the bay, think twice about it because you got to work up to it. Just think about going across underneath that bridge. My swim north was okay. My swim south, they put me in the water too late, and I was beginning to get pushed out toward the fair lawns. Here I am doing butterfly down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The only problem with this picture is, since 2 years ago, I had my right shoulder replaced because I wore it out. Not good. Any of you people that are doing butterfly, think twice about that. And then some of the good parts of the job was, I don't know whether you know who this guy is, but his name is Bob Mueller. He's the head of the FBI. And he's a Marine, like I'm a Marine, and I was in to see him, and he said, Tom, keep up the good work. And I said, I'll try. And then besides that, one of my sort of good friends is a person by the name of Brooke Shields. And as a result of this stuff that I do here and have done elsewhere, she was kind enough to send me a little picture and say, nice to have known you, Tom, but I'm now married, so stay away from me. What do we deal with in the FBI when you're on the street? This is just a small collection of some of the stuff that's out there going around, and by no means exhaustive, but stuff that you have to be concerned about. You've got to be in condition to handle and head off at the pass. And lastly, anybody here from the Boston area or Massachusetts? Huh? No? Okay. This guy's name is Whitey Bulger. I don't know whether you saw a movie called Departed or not, but it's a real shoot-'em-up type of deal, right? This guy served time right here at Alcatraz, 61 and 62, and then eventually was released through the system. He's killed 19 people, and there's a reward out for him, $1 million. So keep that picture in mind in case you see this guy. If you want the million, you know, I mean, I don't know, maybe you don't want the million. But true story is it's he, and this is his traveling girlfriend, Catherine Grieg, and they're out of the Boston area. But they reputedly have been on the West Coast time and again, up and down the coast. And then they have, and this is all off the FBI website. If you got a computer, you go to FBI.gov and wanteds, and they lay all